The cops and criminals genre is almost as old as cinema itself, and over the years we've seen a plethora of great films, such as The Naked City, The French Connection, The Untouchables, The Departed, or as Bostonians would say, The Departed. But there's one film in particular that is truly in a class of its own, and that is Michael Mann's epic crime drama Heat, starring two titans of the big screen, Al Pacino and Robert De Niro. Pacino stars as LAPD detective Vincent Hanna, who squares off against De Niro's Neil McCauley, a career criminal who leads a crew of professional thieves. But there's a whole lot more at work in this film than this simple, cut-and-dried premise alone. We learn about what drives these two men to do what they do, and what makes these two men the best in their individual worlds of law enforcement and criminality. And we also learn what happens when anything and everything that falls outside their professional scope gets cast aside. There's a point in the film where Detective Vincent Hanna sums up the essence of who he is when he says, "All I am is what I'm going after." This also applies to his rival, Neil McCauley. For both of these men, there is only the hunt, the thrill of the chase, the job itself. During the course of the film, we see Vincent and Neil attempt to reconcile their professional and personal lives, as well as the fallout that results from their efforts. Looking at Neil, we see that he leads an austere existence. He strictly adheres to a cold philosophy in which he says, "Don't let yourself get attached to anything you are not willing to walk out on in 30 seconds flat if you feel the heat around the corner." As a professional thief, risk management is central to his entire lifestyle. Attachments with anyone besides the men in his crew equals more liabilities, a higher chance of getting caught by the law. We catch a glimpse of his Malibu home, awash in muted blues and black shadows, and we see Neil standing alone in front of his window, looking at the ocean underneath the night sky. His gun lies on a kitchen countertop, and there is no other furniture or furnishings to be found. It's as if he's squatting inside an unsold empty house, which merely serves as a safe house for him to lay low and get his bearings in between heists. Neil's outward appearance is also a byproduct of his minimalist mentality. He stays adorned in a gray suit and has gray hair, maintaining a nondescript and unmemorable appearance. This was also later referenced by Tom Cruise's hitman character in Collateral. In spite of Neil's meticulous approach to his line of work, there are two destabilizing elements that threaten to upend his very world. The first is a dangerous reprobate named Waingro, the newest addition to Neil's crew. Think Grand Theft Auto V's Trevor Phillips without the methamphetamine-addled charm or likability. During the armored truck robbery sequence early on in the film, Waingro kills one of the guards in cold blood for no apparent reason, which leads Neil and his team to execute the rest before escaping. Now naturally, this unexpected development guarantees Waingro a first-class ticket to the Mortuary Express, but he manages to escape his fate. The second destabilizing element in Neil's world is a woman named Edie, a bookstore employee who notices him from his occasional appearances there, buying books such as How to Be a Better Class of Criminal and Bank Robberies, Assault Weapons, and You. In a rather uncharacteristic move, Neil becomes romantically attached to Edie, and the two lonely individuals begin to build a meaningful connection together, much to his initial surprise and trepidation. On the other side of the equation, we have Vincent, a veteran detective who's so focused on his career that he's currently on his third marriage, which is already on the decline. His wife Justine is none too pleased with the ever-growing chasm between herself and her husband. On top of that, Vincent has to deal with his emotionally disturbed stepdaughter Lauren, whose despair stemming from neglect threatens to consume her. Looking at the personal lives of Vincent, Neil, and Neil's crew, there's an interestingly ironic dynamic to be found. In a scene where Neil, his crew, and their families are enjoying themselves at a fancy restaurant, they all seem to have a stronger sense of normality when compared to the more chaotic Vincent. We see Michael Chirito enjoying the company of his wife and little daughters like an ordinary dad, and we see Chris Shaherlis and his lady Charlene all snuggled up together, keeping their own personal issues at bay. Neil's the only solo figure at the table, and his present company inspires him to call Edie. When he phones her, the left side of the background is blue, just like his empty home, and the right side of the background features the warm colored tones of the restaurant as well as the other patrons. This is a subtle indication of Neil relaxing his self-imposed rule of isolation. He probably figures that he could afford to experience companionship if the rest of his crew can. Getting back to Vincent's home life, while it's certainly clear that he and Justine love each other, when you look at one of their earlier scenes in hindsight, when they're getting it on in the morning, it gives a sense that their efforts at maintaining their own sense of normality are strained. It's as if they're trying a bit too hard to prove to each other, look, we're so totally into each other, right? And we're gonna make this thing work, damn it. Midway in the story, Vince tails Neil on the highway to the awesome tune of Moby's song New Dawn Fades and pulls him over. He invites Neil for a cup of coffee at a restaurant, and the two men engage in a brilliant, revealing conversation which is the film's standout signature scene. They size each other up and gradually divulge their personal dilemmas and even dreams they had. Vince describes a dream where he sees the bloated, dead bodies of homicide victims sitting around a banquet table, staring silently with black eyeballs. In Vincent's words, the bodies have nothing to say. His dream connects back to an earlier conversation he had with Justine, who complains that Vincent refuses to share the details of his work to her like a normal husband, and that he, quote, lives among the remains of dead people. Neil responds with the details of a dream he once had in which he was drowning and forced himself to wake up or else he'd die in his sleep. He remarks that his dream was about, quote, having enough time. Besides having enough time to pull off his next big score, his dream could also be referencing Edie. Perhaps it's also about if he can retire and start fresh with his newfound love, or if the attempt at a normal life for him would spell his own end. As the two rivals converse, Vince also tells Neil that when it comes to his job, he doesn't know how to do anything else, and that he doesn't much want to either. Neil responds likewise, and the two share a brief, knowing smile. Enemies they may be, naturally so given what they both do, but they share the same mutual understanding and even respect for each other. This riveting conversation between Vincent and Neil also shows how, for Vincent, being a so-called typical husband, like his wife wants him to be, does not play at all to Vincent's strengths. He is a hunter. Furthermore, he chooses to remain closed about his job because, as he says, quote, I gotta hold on to my angst. I preserve it because I need it. It keeps me sharp, on the edge, where I gotta be. In the Blu-ray commentary of Heat, Michael Mann notes that cops make one of two choices regarding how they handle the ugliness they have to deal with every day. Some cops become calloused by the horrible things they see, and thus become jaded, detached, and clinical in order to remain sane. Other cops, as with Vincent, fight to avoid becoming cynical so that they always remain cognizant of the human costs of the crimes they investigate. This fuels Vincent's sense of moral justice and makes him a highly effective detective. Now, knowing all of this is not to rationalize or justify Vincent's inattention to his home life. His neglectfulness eventually drives Justine to cheat on him, and when Vince catches the hapless schmuck in their house, he's not entirely surprised about it, although he gets understandably pissed when the dude watches his television set. I mean, come on now, balling another guy's wife? I mean, that's one thing, that's neither here nor there. But to have the audacity to watch his TV too, that's just rude. And that guy really should have known better. Jerk. Back to Neil, we see that his cold and calculated nature makes him such a skilled and efficient thief. As stated earlier, risk management is central to his work, and he's so meticulous that he even keeps tabs on the home lives of his crew. For instance, his partner Chris uses his money to settle some gambling debts, which causes tensions with his wife Charlene. And when Neil learns that Charlene is having an affair with another guy, Neil puts on his marriage counselor hat and gently warns her to, work things out with Chris, lest he lets his relationship problems affect his judgment while on the job. Also, just before the crew partakes in the famously intense bank heist shootout sequence, Neil tries to appeal to Michael's better judgment, citing that he has a wife and 3 kids, as well as more than enough money to retire. Despite Neil's correct assessment that Mike has too much to risk, Mike goes with his own greed and says, well, for me, the action is the juice. I'm in. Besides the main storyline between Vincent and Neil, there's a small yet significant subplot involving an ex-convict named Donald Breeden, played by Dennis Haysbert. Currently on parole, Donald tries to make good by working at a diner. Unfortunately, his boss turns out to be a massive dickhead, taking a good-sized chunk of his paycheck while threatening to have him sent back to prison if he protests. Not only does Donald's story show how some former criminals have difficulty reintegrating into society because of being denied a second chance, it serves as a contrast to both Vincent and Neil's mutual pride in their careers. Donald is the only character in the film who has no effective choice in determining his fate. He wants to work his way up from the bottom, but he's instead stuck in a rut, and he's not in a place where he can become the best at whatever his true talents are, unlike the two main characters. His only solace is that, unlike Vincent, and to a certain degree Neil, Donald's personal life is more fruitful than his professional one, as his wife is unconditionally supportive of him. Heat is an outstanding example of the cops and criminals movie genre. It's not the action sequences, as brilliantly executed as they are, that elevate this film to the upper tier of crime narratives so much as the expertly crafted dialogue, its remarkably authentic performances, and its thought-provoking examination of the clash between the personal and professional realms. Upon further review, I view Heat as Michael Mann's masterpiece, the finest film in his catalog. Pacino and De Niro, as well as the film's mighty supporting cast, infuse sophistication and intelligence in what could have been a run-of-the-mill cops and robbers action flick in the hands of another writer-director. And when you talk about classic cinematic crime dramas, Heat should serve as the textbook example. And as always, thank you so much for watching. I'm Victor Omoayo, and you can find more video essay goodness and reviews right here on the Victor Omoayo channel. Oh man, why'd I get mixed up with that bitch?
'Cause she's got a great ass. And you got your head all the way up in it.
Jesus.
Ferocious, aren't I?